Weaning your toddler off the bottle can be a daunting task. And you know, toddlers are more opinionated, and you might not be feeling totally ready for this transition either. But you know that it's time, or maybe your pediatrician or your dentist told you it is time, and you want this to be as smooth and seamless as possible. As a pediatric registered dietitian nutritionist who works almost exclusively with families of toddlers, this is something that comes up over and over again. So I'll share with you how I coach my parents through this transition to make sure that your little one still gets all the nutrition that they need, and I'll share my number one tip for the quickest transition possible. I'm Casey Barnes, registered dietitian nutritionist and mom of two. Make sure to hit subscribe and follow along for more toddler nutrition and feeding tips. Let's talk about bottles. This can be a very emotional topic, and I find that most families haven't gotten through feeding their baby without some sort of struggle. Either getting them to take bottles was hard, nursing was hard, figuring out the schedule was hard. Like, usually feeding your baby has some sort of challenge, and that's normal. And it's okay if this transition of dropping bottles feels really emotional to you, or even feels like you don't want to do it. Since weaning from bottles can be upsetting for both your little one and you, I'm gonna first talk about why we want to make this transition, why it's a necessary step for your little one, and I'll walk you through my step-by-step to drop those bottles with hopefully very few tears. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend eliminating bottles around 12 months of age and really no later than 18 months old. There's a few reasons for this. One is dental. Prolonged bottle use can cause tooth decay, cavities, especially if the toddler takes the bottle to bed or drinks from it frequently throughout the day. Orthodontic issues can become a concern as well. I've learned that the tongue is an extremely strong muscle, and it pushing against the roof of the mouth with the bottle nipple can actually cause changes to the shape of the palate and the teeth, and we don't really want to cause those problems. From a nutritional standpoint, baby is ready to move towards a meal and snack schedule when they turn 1, and we want to move away from bottles as primary nutrition. Another reason this is super important is because it can contribute to picky eating. I see time and time again little ones who stay on frequent bottle feedings longer than necessary do have a harder time in general adapting to a wider variety in their diet. They also do tend to drink more than they need from a bottle. So a lot of times I'll hear parents say, when we got rid of the bottle, they didn't drink nearly as much milk, and so I'm worried that they're not getting enough. And totally understand why you would feel that way, but what's actually happening is that it's so much easier for them to guzzle from a bottle than from a cup that a lot of times they drink it before they even realize that they've drained it. So just because they're not drinking as much does not mean that they're not getting the nutrition that they need. Another thing that can come up is that if we get into a habit of offering them a bottle after a meal or after a meal that they didn't eat much at, then they can kind of get in this cycle of saying, you know what, I'm really not as interested in the food, I'm way more interested in the bottle. So I rather just not have what mom or dad or whoever's offering me here and wait until I can get my bottle. That's easier. So then we kind of get stuck on the bottle too long and don't progress. Now, I'm not saying anyone should feel guilty if you are finding that your little one is over 18 months and you're still using a bottle, or maybe you're saying, you know what, I just used it at bedtime and I'm not that concerned about it. I don't think that this is going to ruin the world. Make sure you brush their teeth afterwards, and you do, like, when they're around 2-3 years old, like, we do want to move them away from that baby phase and move them forward. Now, how? Tell me, Casey, how am I gonna get rid of this bottle that my little one loves so much, and we're so used to this routine that we're in with our bottles? How do we do this? Step number 1 is to make sure that you get into a good routine of 3 meals and about 2 snacks a day. This is gonna look a little bit different for each child depending on when they sleep, how many naps, all of that. Take a look at the link that I shared below that has my 1-year-old feeding schedules in it. It's a blog post that will give you a lot more information about what exactly that can look like and ideas of what you can feed them. We want to make sure we have that routine in place so they're getting enough opportunities for their calories throughout the day without having to rely on any bottles. Midday bottles are usually the easiest ones to drop if you haven't already done so. Next, I think it's important to prepare them for the transition, especially if you're nervous about them being upset about the change. So a few days in advance, mark your date on the calendar for when you're gonna do the transition and tell them a few days in advance what's gonna happen. You can tell them very simply, we're going to say bye-bye to bottles. Bottles are for babies and you're a big kid now. And we're even gonna have a little party. So I'll tell you more about the party. It's not a big deal, but for them, it'll feel really fun. Remember, toddlers love to be in control. So we want to give them some control in this situation that is very much out of their control. One way that you can do that is by giving them a choice with their cup that they get for their milk. So if you have a couple already at home, you can give them a choice there. If you want to, go on Amazon or whatever and pick out a new one, that's great too, but let them have some ownership over it so they can feel some sort of excitement about what's coming next. Straw cups and open cups are best. I'll link to my Amazon shop where I share my favorites. Now, when the big day comes, you have your little bye-bye bottle party. Don't give them a drink out of it on that last day. We're just gonna say goodbye to the bottles. So do a little song, do a little dance, maybe break out some toy instruments and shake some maracas. Just have a fun little thing to make this a moment of saying goodbye. Invite your toddler to help you pack up the bottles, whether you're saving them for another baby, giving them away to a friend, getting rid of them altogether, I don't care, but the key here is for them to see that these bottles are going away and they are no longer an option. Your toddler may happily go along with this whole thing. They may throw a complete fit and not be happy about it at all. We don't really know until we get into the situation. If they're upset, that doesn't mean that you just abandon ship. It means they're expressing their discontent with the change and you can be there to comfort them. This is something that I personally have struggled with as a mom, of seeing them upset and wanting to fix it, wanting to give in to what they want. So I'm like, I don't want them to be upset. But remember, our job is not to prevent them from ever feeling any pain or any sadness. Our job is to help them cope through these difficult moments because there's gonna be plenty ahead of them in life. And it's good to have that foundation of being able to work through the sadness and feel our feelings and get through to the other side. We want them to know that they will be okay without bottles, because they will, and you will too. If bottles have been part of the bedtime routine, I would replace them with some extra snuggles with you. If they ask about it or demand it, you can calmly remind them that we said bye-bye to our bottles, and it's okay to be sad and to miss their bottle. It's hard to do new things. If they're reliant on the bottle to actually fall asleep, then that's a different story, and I would definitely check out my friend Becca at Little Z Sleep for recommendations there. That is not my zone of expertise, but she's got you. Now let's talk about that number 1 key for a smoother transition. And the key, my friends, is consistency. I promise it's better for everyone if you lock those bottles away. Throw them away. Do not let them be an option, because sometimes we crack, you know what I'm saying? And if it's not an option, then they're going to move through this much quicker. Yes, there's still likely going to be some adjustment and them being upset, but if the bottles do come back out after we said bye-bye, then that's a really confusing message to them, and they're gonna think, well, if I throw a big enough tantrum, then I can get my bottles back. So that's what I'm gonna do every day. I don't want that to happen to you. So let's just knock them out for good, be consistent, and then get through those couple of days of transition, and then they're going to be just fine. Now for some FAQs, you might wanna know, do I drop bottles and switch to milk at the same time? And yes, you totally can do that. If they're on the younger end, like in that 12 to 18 month range, and you haven't switched to cow's milk yet, you can all together at once get rid of bottles and switch to milk in a cup with meals. You're gonna wanna aim for about 16 to 20 ounces of milk per day once they hit 1 year old, and that'll kind of stay consistent. What about breastfeeding? Breastfeeding is totally fine, and you can continue that if that's what you want to do, if your body allows. This is not about breastfeeding, this is just about the bottle. If you are pumping, then I would suggest switching it to serving in a cup at this age range versus the bottle, just for those dental reasons that we mentioned before, but you don't have to give it up. I've been happy to hear from many parents who said that this was way less painful than they thought it was going to be. The transition was much smoother than they expected, and it really ended up being kind of a non-event that they were really worried about leading up to, and then it was fine in the end. Okay, if all this is making you tired just thinking about it, then you also need to check out my Dinnertime Survival Guide. It's a 6-week weeknight meal plan with healthy, toddler-friendly meals that all can get on the table in under 15 minutes. I think in this season of life, we all need to give ourselves a break, and this is what I can do for you with the Dinnertime Survival Guide. Just don't even worry about planning. You don't even have to be the one to make it. This is foolproof. Husbands, nannies, babysitters, grandparents, other caregivers, anybody can follow this easy guide. So check it out at the link below.